I'd like to welcome Dr. Erin Eatough for joining us today, this evening. Erin, as many of you may know from the information that I sent to you and Archana sent to you over the course of the last month, is a manager and lead researcher of behavioral science at BetterUp. She is the research director and author behind BetterUp Research and Insights blog column, and speaks regularly about the science behind human thriving at both academic and industry events. Erin received her Ph.D. in IO, Industrial and Organizational Psychology, from the University of South Florida. And before BetterUp, she was an assistant professor in IO Psychology's doctoral program at City University of New York, Baruch College. With over 30 articles and contributions to books and book chapters, she actively publishes her work and her research, which is at the intersection of work and well-being. She's been featured in various outlets such as Journal of Applied Psychology, Journal of Organizational Behavior, and cited in media outlets such as Harvard Business Review. So I'd like to warmly welcome Dr. Erin Eatough, and thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us what you have on life at BetterUp.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. And I'm so glad to be here. I have really missed being in a classroom environment and teaching and being able to interact with students. So I'm so glad to be able to be a guest tonight.
Well, we are very happy that you're here. For 45 minutes or so, Dr. Eatough will share with us some of her experience and background, what BetterUp is all about, and how IO psychology is supporting counseling and mental health world. And so we are a world that does contribute to one another. And we have mostly IO psychology students here today. So please feel free to ask all the IO related questions and counseling questions for anyone interested in the counseling side that Erin is able to address. You have the floor. You should be able to share your screen. And if not, let me know. We'll try to figure that out.
All right. So I wanted to, just sort of take a moment to preface this talk for a minute. I think that there's been a big shift in the world related to how organizations and leaders are thinking about issues related to occupational health, to well-being, how it shows up in the workplace, and really what their responsibility and role is. And so I think we're at a really unique moment in history where I think we'll look back at this time as a big turning point, or at least acceleration toward a more sort of enlightened view of how our work lives, our personal lives all intersect, blend together, and the importance of the employer and the work context and environment in shaping really just the condition of human experience and thriving. And so I know that, being students in psychology of a couple different varieties, oftentimes I remember when I was in graduate school thinking back to career related decisions, going into academia. Obviously, my career is right now a reflection of both, where I was in academia and then now I'm in industry. And so I kind of have that lens from both worlds. But, these decisions can feel really weighty. And so my goal tonight is to just share with you a little bit about BetterUp. Of course, this is just one organization in the world that uses IO psychology, that has an OHP focus, that focuses on mental health and mental fitness, counseling and coaching. But hopefully it can be valuable to you to just get a picture of what it feels like inside of our organization, how we think about psychology, how IO psychology sits in different functions within the business, how it shows up in our product, how it shows up in our assessments, what kind of jobs, IO psychologists or other types of psychologists are doing, what the coaching really looks like, that coaching and counseling side of the business. So I'm here to talk about all and any of that. And I've put together a presentation, but I also want to just caveat by saying, please ask any question. So a little bit about me. So I've been at BetterUp for about 4 years, and I've sat in a variety of different roles at BetterUp. So as Sharon was saying, I was in academia before I came to BetterUp. I left after about 5 years. I was on a tenure track line, and more than likely would have been successful going through the tenure process, but for a variety of reasons, which this talk is not about, I decided to pivot, and I ended up finding this role. It felt like a pretty big risk at the time. We were very small, only about 70 employees. I think I was the 70th hire. But I could feel a lot of alignment between my personal mission in life, which, surrounds OHP related topics, and wanting to bring science and evidence-based practice to how we help people achieve higher levels of well-being inside of super demanding, high-paced, high-stress work environments. And so the mission of BetterUp, which is to help people everywhere live their lives with greater clarity, passion, and purpose, felt very aligned to what I wanted to do with my life and my skills and my training. And so I ended up taking the leap. So I have sat, as I said, in a variety of different roles. I've been client facing. The first role that I had, I was in a title called Senior Behavioral Scientist. And that role was one where I was both helping in pre-sales conversations as a subject matter expert in psychology, in mental health, helping to sort of guide our HR buyers. So typically we were, at least at that time, mostly selling into enterprises and working with the HR leadership in those enterprises to help them make, a large purchase that they would then provide as a learning and development tool or as a benefit to their employee population. So serving as a subject matter expert there, also doing post-sales consulting. So after BetterUp had been purchased or has been purchased, helping to make sense of the data that we're collecting, to contextualize it, to extract the insights, to craft sort of a story around it that makes sense to our client, to our account, and then to provide, evidence-based recommendations. What should we do next? What does this data mean? How should you use this to inform how your program is going or how you're expanding? Who gets access to this type of support? Also doing research, so using both our internal data and external data that we collect either in partnership with academics or on our own, running studies, and then doing research that we were using in a variety of capacities at the time, both internal for research and development and external, or kind of used to bring to the market or bring to our partners. And then a fourth role was doing actual marketing work. So at the time, because we were so small, also, I was one of a couple people that would get tagged or tapped on the shoulder to present at conferences, to represent us externally, to, have an appearance or do speaking events in sort of the role of a subject matter expert on behalf of the business and a behavioral scientist on behalf of the business. So anyway, did that for a while. Then I ran a small sub team. We did client analytics. And so that team was all focused on all the back-end analytics. Anytime we had an account where we were doing custom work with their data to understand either how people were doing, where are their hotspots with any of the things that we measure. And I will get into that in just a minute so that it doesn't feel like such a black box. But just to try to quickly give you an overview of where I am or where I've been in BetterUp's ecosystem. So did analytics or technical backend work, and then also presenting those insights back to clients. Then I moved into marketing. So I'm currently sitting in marketing. So kind of a weird thing. And I could also talk about that for quite a while, but I won't take up too much time. But when I was asked to move into marketing, I did kind of go through a bit of a identity crisis, because I felt like, why would I go into marketing? I don't know anything about marketing. I'm a psychologist. I was trained in IO. I this isn't my realm. And so I had to kind of work through that and like embrace and be open. But it turns out like this has been a really amazing place for me to sit, because I've sat in a couple different teams in marketing, but overall, the common thread in these teams I've sat on and serving the marketing organization is to play the role of a translator and help bring science into how we speak about our business, how we speak about our product, how we speak about ourselves and our brand and what we're trying to do, and bring that trust, that credibility, that authority to what we're trying to evangelize and democratize access to mental health support and to coaching. And it's a unique area, because I'm sure you know, not every organization, not every leader recognizes the importance, the value of these things. It's shifting a lot, as I said, but there is a lot of work to do still. And so one of the macro level charges or challenges that I see organizations like us facing is that we have to really be able to persuade, convince, show, and storytell around the impact of actually putting a prioritization coefficient on thriving and well-being and mental health and mental fitness and these types of sort of what I think organizations sometimes may feel like are outside of their wheelhouse or outside of their scope of responsibility. It's shifting those hearts and minds and showing. And oftentimes, at least I feel that data and research and insights are such a really powerful way for us to be able to do that and to be able to help people see what it is we're trying to do and how we're trying to change the world. So that's just a little bit about me. So I'm currently sitting in the marketing team. I have a couple behavioral scientists on my team as well. One is a developmental psychologist, one is a social psychologist, and then I, of course, am OHP, but we all call ourselves behavioral scientists. And we are actually executing, we kind of function like a mini lab where we execute research projects together. Some things we're doing together, sometimes we're doing research independently. And we have kind of like journal clubs, book club, just the three of us. But we're constantly creating new insights and discoveries and research that we can serve into content that goes out to the world in our blogs, in our research reports, in webinars, in other events that we do. So kind of the big macro audience, like the general audience, what we're bringing to market there. Okay. Maybe I'll stop just for a minute, just before I go on, just to see if anyone has any questions about all of that ramble of sort of who I am and what my perspective is or where I'm sitting.
I actually have one.
Okay, sure.
One of the things that you said is that one of your macro challenges is being able to show with data and storytell.
Yeah.
What would you say is even more macro than that, the pressures in today's society influencing what it is that you are charged to do?
Is your question beyond even that, like a higher level from even that? What do I see as an even like 30,000 foot view of challenge?
Exactly.
I mean, I think I think it's societal, really. I mean, I think we have crafted a society in which our expectations of productivity, of performance, of output, of speed, all of that is ever increasing as technology increases and we get those, efficiency gains. And I think that I think in a way, society and sort of human beings, at least in sort of the first world, countries, or at least in the West and in the United States, like I think we've outpaced ourselves. Like it's really unsustainable, the speed and demand that we expect of human beings and the sustained performance that we expect without rest, without recovery, without movement in our days, without connection to nature, without, the ability to foster, our personal relationships. And of course, that this is like very broad sweeping and maybe more for sort of the, white collar thought leadership, but it's just, or, businesses that are, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for here, but like businesses that are, you're sort of like technology and industries where you're sitting at a computer, you're sitting at a desk, and you're doing that day in and day out. And the demands, even as we've moved into hybrid work and remote work, that hasn't like let off the pedal. It's just pushed the pedal down even further. And I think created an even more bigger challenge. And the root cause of that is societal. I mean, the root cause of that is a lack of recognition. It's a lack of awareness. It's just a like a singular focus on, money and performance and achievement and comparison and, just keeping up. And I think that, I think that that's not healthy for us. And I think it's a really hard problem to tackle. Did you have something else in mind? Like,
no, actually, when you're saying this, I'm just thinking to myself that in many ways, when you are persuading and convincing and showing and storytelling and trying to give vision to industry leaders, to people in businesses about the importance of mental health and well-being to be able to thrive in the workplace, in many ways, you continue to be an educator of those business people who then have to, who do have a somewhat of a stronger voice and influence on societal policy and practices, because we know that the world of OHP has been crying since the early 60s. Yeah. And we're not making much of a dent. Right. So you're educating these people to try to help create a dent.
Right. And I think that, the last few years have created this unique window of opportunity where we have been rethinking how we operate, how businesses function, how do we support people when they're at home, how does this work logistically? And it's given organizations this moment to, like, they've had to like press reset in a way, like, okay, everything changed. The physicalities have changed. The constraints that we used to have changed, the dynamic, the context, everything. And so we have this moment now to reset policy, to reset, what our vision of the employee experience looks like. What are the ways that we're also going to be a talent marketplace winner, and how are we going to be, have a competitive advantage in the talent marketplace now that physical boundaries have opened up so many options for any individual person. We're not just competing against the people in our, the other companies in our city, competing against the whole world. And so there's been this like moment of realization, I think, for a lot of organizations to sort of acknowledge, like, okay, not only do we have this like moment of opportunity where we're rethinking what the new normal is going to be and what the employee experience looks like now and how we're going to shape that and craft that, but also how do we think about what people really need and want, because those things are actually mattering for our viability as, a talent magnet, basically. And that's what employees demand. The expectations have shifted. And so while, yes, I think we all know OHP has been around for these decades. We've been talking about these ideas. We've been proving it out. But it hasn't had the traction that one might want. And so that's why it's really exciting right now. I mean, I have to imagine sitting in your seats as students, it's really exciting to be entering into a field where there is like a simultaneous aperture opening of like, oh, this actually really matters. And this is actually a way an area that organizations want to invest in, that people are more willing to talk about, people in general as, a society, we're more willing right now to talk about mental health, to acknowledge our needs, to be forthright about this. It's becoming it's coming out of the shadows. The stigma is not gone, but we're making progress, right? And so it's a very exciting moment for me to see that happening, and to see the amount of investment and money behind it that employers are willing to put behind it, and the real sort of openness of people to address and talk about it, and be open about really the challenges and how that shows up for them, because that's important too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that was good. That was a good little OHP in the future of work discussion. So this is sort of my plan. I want to be conscious of time. So if there's anything here, maybe I'll actually ask you, Sharon. I wanted to sort of offer up a little view of like BetterUp just generally, and maybe nice to just hear like what we do, kind of what the product is, how it works, like how IO or how psychology is informing that product, and what BetterUp looks like. And then we can talk about how the science and behavioral science, psychology shows up in our measurement and our assessments, in our actual products for partners and members, in our content marketing, which is where I lead in the business, is the science in our content marketing. And then also how we just do pure basic science in our business, which is kind of unusual, I think. But we have a whole team that works on sort of just science for the sake of new discovery and innovation. And it's also in that group that a lot of our academic collaborations happen. So I thought that could be also of interest. Does this seem like a good order of operations?
That's a resounding yes.
Okay, all right. All right, so quickly, BetterUp overview. We are here to help people everywhere live their life with greater clarity, passion, and purpose. And what we do is we offer coaching. So we offer coaching. We also offer a product called Care, which is more of a blend between coaching and counseling. So a lot of the coaches who are on our Care product are actually licensed psychologists, mental health counselors, and that product is really focused on helping people build mental fitness. And it's very preventative. It's about sort of the perspective is, let's not wait for people to be in a situation of mental health crisis before we, provide mental health support. We can provide mental health support before, it's sort of a clinical diagnosis. And that's what we talk about. This space on a mental health continuum is the middle space. It's like, you're not in a DSM criteria, but you're not killing it, and you're not like super happy, and you're not, loving every minute of your life. Not that any of us are really, that's realistic goal, but the idea is that, there's a lot of people. Some of our research has found like 55% of people in the population in general are in a state of what we label as languishing. So it's like, it's not really thriving, but it's not clinical DSM. And it's like, okay, we have just totally ignored this whole experience that human beings have, where they can use support. But generally the model is we don't give them support unless it actually qualifies as, at a certain threshold. At least in organizations, right? So we offer coaching. I guess you could call Care as sort of a hybrid of coaching, counseling for mental fitness. And then we also offer a human transformation platform, which includes studio workshops, which are like classes. You kind of think of it like a Peloton style, where you can kind of log in and see what live classes are happening all day, every day. You can sign up and take them on different topics like resilience, or managing overwhelm, or working parents, but a slew of different topics. We also have coaching circles, which are groups of people that get together for like an 8-week program and do coaching. You can sign up for those. And then we also have a whole suite of learning resources and community spaces where you can connect with people like you on topics. So there's a lot going on at BetterUp. We have a lot of different products and it's been expanding really rapidly. I think when we started, it was really just coaching. It was like a coach in your pocket, but now we've got this whole product suite. We was founded in 2013. We're now at about 700 employees globally, so have really exploded in sort of size. And we've got over 50 Ph.D. psychologists on staff. So it's really amazing. Our psychologists are embedded throughout our entire organization. I can talk about that a little more in a minute. And then we also have over 2,000 coaches across the world. And these coaches, like I said, are they are not formally a part of our organization, but they are contract employees. So similar to well, you can think of like a lot of people who are doing coaching or doing their own practice in mental health. We basically offer them a way to get access to all of our clients. So, we're serving the big conglomerate organizations of the world, the Hiltons and, the Chevrons and these, major organizations. And so we then offer them access to, a whole body or population of coaches, and we match people together within our coach population. And so that way, if you're a coach or you're a counselor, you don't have to advertise, you don't have to do anything to get clients. We just match you. Your schedule gets auto-populated with the time blocks you have open. Your matched coachees or members will be able to see your schedule, book up time, and you're done. So it's really nice for coaches because oftentimes they have, they have like something outside of BetterUp and then they're doing BetterUp part-time. We do have some coaches or counselors that this is their full-time job. And it's, I think, a really great experience for our coach community as well, because they get to know each other. We do a lot of development and training, and they're a crucial, critical part of our BetterUp community and ecosystem as well, despite not being sort of full-time employees in the sort of the corporate organization. Any questions about that? I don't know if I explained that clearly enough, and that may be really interesting to you all listening. So I'll just wait and see if there's any questions about what I just said about how the coaches and the other psychologists.
Has her hand up.
Yeah.
Hi. So this is really interesting to me. So these coaches, you guys contract this out. Is this something where you guys either vet the programs that they're doing or you offer training so there's a consistent theme across what you're offering to people?
Both. Yeah. So when you become a BetterUp coach, first there's you go through an application process, which is actually pretty rigorous. There's only like a 7% acceptance rate of all coaches that apply. But once you become accepted as a BetterUp coach, then you go through sort of a BetterUp onboarding. So you become really well versed in our business, our values, all sort of like a typical onboarding experience to an organization. And then for any for any deployment or contract that we have. So let's say, we learn that your specialty is in diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And we just got this big contract with organization Y, and they want, coaching related to that topic. So now you're in the pool, and we would also onboard you to that company's goals, to their leadership competency models, to, the problems, the challenges that they have, their culture, so that you as a coach in serving clients from that organization have a good lay of the land and context and support around like what the organization is hoping to achieve by, coaching the people that are a part of the program, and really what the people are likely going to be struggling with as well. And then we offer different certifications and additional trainings and professional development within BetterUp as well. So as a BetterUp coach, there's also ongoing opportunities to become certified as a BetterUp DEIB coach if you weren't certified in DEIB before, or something like that.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Another hand, Carl.
I was wondering, so is the organization the client? And then
Yes.
they pay for that service for the employees? Is it available to all employees or certain tiers?
Yeah, it depends on the account. So different organizations, some organizations will purchase coaching for 100 employees. Some organizations like Mars the candy, they purchased coaching for every new manager. So anytime a person went from being an individual contributor to a manager, they went through like a new manager training and they got a better up coach for 6 months or 9 months to help them with that transition to being a people leader. Other organizations are offering to every single person in the organization, but not coaching per se. That would be really prohibitively expensive. But that's why we now have these various options where you may have some percentage of people with a one-to-one coach, some percentage of people that are able to access like studio workshops and group coaching, and some percentage of people who their readiness level or their contextual situation is sort of more amenable to just being able to have community and learning resources and sort of the access to the technology and to the human transformation platform, but no one-to-one coach.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Erin, what is the line between the mental health professional coach and the leadership management development coach? How does the line get drawn, and at what point do you start seeing potential blurring of lines and potential questions of crossing boundaries of competence?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in our core product, like in our coaching product, our leadership, we call it lead product, which is like the leadership management coaching, traditional coaching. Those individuals who are in our coach pool are either trained through like a certified coaching organization. So like an ICF certification is one of the certifications that we accept. And I think that there's one other one. So they have to have like a coaching certification. And then they also have to have, I think it's a really high number. And I could get you this information as sort of a follow-up if the class is curious of really what those like specifications are for, who are these people and how do we hire them. But I think it's like 3,000 hours of coaching or something like that. So the threshold is pretty rigorous for leadership coaching in that end. But we also in the leadership coaching program will accept clinical psychologists, counseling psychologists, anyone who has a degree in those areas and is licensed. And then they also have to have like 1,000 hours of coaching experience. So to be in the lead program, you have to have actual leadership coaching experience, be it through an ICF certification and hours, or be it through a licensure and hours. But we do need like hours, I think, of leadership coaching to qualify. And then in the care product, which is like the mental fitness, it's really focused on well-being. It's more around counseling and coaching for mental fitness. I think that those standards are a little bit different. I don't think that we include like ICF certified coaches there, but that's actually a really good question. I don't know if I want to, maybe I shouldn't speak any further about that before I know, because I'm not exactly sure, but I can definitely find that out. That's an easy follow-up if you're interested in what that
would be interesting.
are.
Thank you. Because we talk a lot in a different class on ethics and boundaries of competence. And even in today's, the students were reading, I don't know if you're familiar with the article by Miraglia and James that about presenteeism. And so some of the students were raising the, Sarah, I think you posed the question about at what point do we start referring people to mental health professionals as IO?
Yes, it was like about the blurred line between when is the organization like educated to draw the line, or like do employees know to draw the line themselves with presenteeism, absenteeism?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that these are questions that we have a whole coach ethics board. So there's a whole board of individuals that sit on our ethics committee for coaching and make these decisions and set policy around even just like, how do we, I mean, I think this would be a really interesting discussion that I don't feel well equipped to lead at this moment, but it's like, there are thresholds that are business guides around, like, how do you decide if this person actually needs to be referred out of BetterUp, like just totally out, like to legit, a clinical environment that's not like what we're doing really. And so, yeah, I think that those are concerns that our business for sure has to address head on and set actual guidelines around policy. So yeah, that'll be a good follow-up. I'm interested too. I don't really know. So I talked about this a little bit. So we have dedicated coaches, specialist coaches who focus on sleep. We also have nutritionists, diversity, equity, inclusion, communication coaches. We do circles, and then we do these like studio workshops and digital interactive experiences. And as I mentioned before, we have scientists embedded throughout the organization. So this slide kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of where, didn't mean to do that, of where all of the scientists are. And of course, this is just a subset, but we've got IO psychologists and other forms of behavioral scientists all throughout, in sales, in account management, course marketing, that's me, in assessments, and people science, product. In fact, our chief product officer is a psychiatrist, which is really, really amazing, actually. She's an amazing leader and also a trained MD psychologist or psychiatrist. We have it in our solutions consulting, which is really our consulting organization, in operations, growth and strategy and technology alliances, in our research and development, that's labs core, also in programs and content. So this is where like Michaela Castro is leading, like how members, what is all that member content? How do we select that content, build out that content? What does that look like? What is it? And then also, in our programs and just sort of administrative executive leadership. So it's everywhere, which is really great. It's great to be in an environment where you've got people that kind of understand. And then we have a science board. So our science board are, individuals that are not necessarily involved in the day-to-day like operations, but that we kind of consult with, that we call upon for various marketing and other types of events, but also for advice and consults, input. So you can see who those are. Marty Seligman and Adam Grant and Josh, actually all of them have pretty big influence. Yeah, all of them do. I was just going to call out like some that are really active. They're all actually really active. So, and then our science shows up across our business in a variety of ways. So we have a set of assessments that we call the whole person model. So we have validated assessments, and we, as a business and using our IO psychologist sort of contingents inside the business, actually created all of these assessments. So writing all the items, doing all the psychometric testing, doing all the validation studies, looking both cross-sectionally and longitudinally, and, figuring out the best sort of measurement structure and approach for all of our assessments. That was a huge undertaking that took about a year, maybe a little more actually, to create the assessment that we use now called whole person model. In our coach selection, of course, in coach matching. So that's sort of, we use an algorithm that we have every member who joins BetterUp. So when they get a BetterUp access, we take them through a variety of questions, including the whole person model assessment, but also a lot of other questions about kind of readiness to change, different types of events that may be going on in their life. And we use that with artificial intelligence and an algorithm to create like a match.com sort of style, like you've been matched, but we provide 3 matches. And from there, we provide agency to the member to choose among these, like, here are the 3 that we think based on all the information you told us are going to be the best match. But you can feel free to sort of do your own research on these 3, figure it out and match. And then they can always do that process again. So there's still always opportunity to rematch, but we also have nudges in the product. We use a lot of learning principles, even just from sort of the science behind learning with distributive practice, reinforcement, reflection, like what are the best methods to help people actually transform, to really know something and then be able to practice it and stay accountable to someone. And what is the ideal schedule of staying accountable with a coach? So we use all of that external science and internal science to help inform really what the experience is like for someone who's really trying to change or trying to grow and develop. Of course, our learning resources are evidence-based, our coach training and development, evidence-based, our product development, our research and development organization is really active. So the labs team, we call it the labs, but it's really an R&D function. A lot of their work is like, how do we think of like, how do we disrupt and change the game for what it looks like to think about the value of diversity, like, or what's the next big, revelation to push this field of science forward? How do we, imagine what could we win a Nobel Peace Prize for? What's the blue sky, unlimited sort of abundant mindset to how we can shake and move and contribute to these areas of science? And a lot of that work gets fed right back into product. So some of the work that the team is doing now is around natural language processing and analyzing conversations, being able to help people build emotional intelligence faster through a really, sophisticated artificial intelligence overlay on coaching sessions, like one kind of a push. But also other things like, how do you identify what a really good coach looks like? And so they've done projects looking at how we can identify that, and then how we can help move other coaches to be closer to that, and how we can do that faster. So that's the kind of stuff that they work on, and it's all really fascinating and exciting. And then, of course, consulting. So we have a lot of psychologists in our consulting organization who work with the clients to make sense of their data, to understand how their people are doing, to understand what they should do next, how can they support them better, and then also in program design. And what I mean by program design is like, okay, you imagine you're a buyer at an organization, you just bought 100 seats of coaching for your marketing team. When should I give it to them? I have 200 people on my marketing team. Who should I give it to? How should this be integrated with our performance management, cadence, or, like, how do we actually implement? What does that look like? What's the best way to optimize the experience for people? I think I can skip this, but this is just like a quick sort of view of like how a person's journey could change. Like they may start out with just learning resources, then they want to bump up to one-to-one coaching for 6 months, then they need to really focus on sleep for a little bit, then they're going to reflect and do, another assessment, and then they go into like a circle or studio workshop. So it could be, everybody could have their own journey, and what we offer is sort of a precision development pathway for each person based on what we're learning about them over time and what we know is the most effective kind of recipe for success. So we have a variety of different assessments. We have self-assessment, as I described. We also ask for manager feedback. So managers provide assessments. We have a 360-degree and 180-degree feedback tool. So we get assessments from around the individual. Then we also have organization level assessments, and other kinds of emotional metric signals from open-ended qualitative responses through our natural language processing tool. So we've got a lot of different assessments that can provide a really unique window into how people are doing, what they're feeling, what they need. And it gives us both a lot of information for the partner, a lot of information for the individual. But what I really get excited about is it gives us a lot of information to do really fun research with. And I get really excited about using all this data to put, together new external facing science and insights. All right, so the assessment that we use, just, to give you kind of a sense of what it means to have an assessment like this, or like what the data is that we collect and how an individual's inner life and sort of external professional life blends together in these assessment experiences. Our whole person model includes these two kind of core domains. One is inspiring as a leader, the other is thriving as a person. So inspiring as a leader is really just like the core competencies that many organizations are looking to build in their leadership. It's about motivating others, encouraging others, and, bringing out the best in other people, guiding them and coaching them, and having the skill to direct people, and then also creating a really inclusive, psychologically safe environment for people. So it's really about being able to elicit, behavior out of other people, inspiring as a leader. And then thriving as a person is more inward, and it's about, are you well? Are you taking care of your emotional health, of your social health and your social connection needs? Are you able to focus? Are you able to think clearly? Do you have the ability to, hold duality and be in the gray, and have agility in how you think? And are you taking care of your physical health? Meaning, like, are you getting enough rest and sleep and nutrition? So we measure all of these things, and really the foundational kind of philosophy that we talk to our partners about is that, your competency models are up here about, like, okay, you got to be able to lead your teams, and you got to be able to, really motivate and, extract performance out of these people. But nobody can do a good job at that if they don't take care of themselves first and put your oxygen mask on first type of idea. And so we talk about that a lot, and it really isn't probably too groundbreaking for you thinking just about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's very much there, where it's like, you can't inspire if you're not able to, if you're totally stressed out, redlined, and distracted. I mean, it's just that's the fact. And we see this time and time and again in our data. We have a lot of really cool data visuals that illustrate just how, like, the only time that people ever even get to talking about leadership and leadership development in coaching is when their well-being scores are at a certain threshold of, like, stable. So it's totally fascinating, because people, of course, organizations also will buy BetterUp, and they may have a goal of, like, we've got to, fix X problem, or we're going through this huge change at work and we need everybody to get on board, and we want people to be, open-minded about this merger, whatever it is. And we're giving them coach to figure out how to navigate all the complexities of merging this, company with another company. Cool. Turns out that a lot of times people just end up talking about well-being, and we see it in our coaching topics. And that's because it's the most important thing. Like, if you're going to spend time working on getting yourself to a certain level of performance, or getting yourself to a certain level of readiness to navigate a change, to be resilient, you have to take care of yourself. And we see it in the data over and over again. So it's really fascinating. But this is what we kind of talk about with partners from the very beginning. Like, I think this slide I pulled out of our first call deck, where we just, are introducing ourselves to a potential buyer for the first time, but we talk about this concept.
Hey, I'm sorry, I was just wondering, are the assessments proprietary?
Yeah.
So, okay. And then, and I was just wondering, when you were talking about the, your last subject, so how do you create expectations and set goals with the clients? Because you probably don't go in and say, hire us and we'll solve all your problems. Do you say we can reduce your absenteeism by 20% or something
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah. So, yes, a lot of times, sometimes there's a dance in just figuring out what it is the client is trying to do and getting clarity on what their, goals are and their needs are, and really understanding what their motivation is for introducing a tool like BetterUp or, a service like ours. But yes, the account team, especially the account managers. So like going back to just like, where people are. So like Levi Niemanen, he's on our account management team. And that whole team, their job is to strategize with the partner around like, what are your goals? What does success look like? What does a success plan look like? How are we going to set that up to make sure that we deliver that to you? And so, yes, we get really clear about that. But then also we have a whole lot of data that we include or share, of course, on an as needed basis, but around like, okay, if your goal is to really help people prevent burnout, and burnout is happening and people are stressed and they're leaving the organization, how do we metric against that? What is a realistic timeline to see shifts in that? What are going to be the early indicators of shifting there? We're not going to give people BetterUp and then 2 months later, everything's solved. But like, what are some of the early indicators and what have we learned from our data that tell us that you're on the right track and what to expect and what the difference is going to be? What are we going to see in terms of magnitude of change in sort of burnout risk or stress or well-being? And how is that going to show up in some of the more distal outcomes like performance or employer NPS or job satisfaction or turnover intention? So we've got all of that data. We also do return on investment analyses. So we will also run simulations before purchase, and then we will run actual ROI analyses after purchase using actual data. So we use a conglomerate of our data to do, the simulated ROI analyses, but then we will use their actual data to get at, what we estimate is the actual investment return given an X magnitude growth or reduction, say in stress, because we know from evidence that stress then leads to, higher performance, less turnover, blah, 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 and we can quantify that.
And are the clients typically aware that this is a sort of a journey? It's like they don't just do it for a year and then it's over.
Do you mean the business, like the buyer, or the individual member, like the person who's getting coaching?
The buyer.
The buyer. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, oftentimes they will purchase a contract for it all varies. We of course love multi-year contracts, but that's not always the case. We often will have multi-year contracts, but sometimes they're just a year. And so then it's made clear up front. But of course, like, let's say that they bought for a year, or they bought for 2 years or 3 years. That whole time, our account management team is also really staying very close to that account, to those partners, to the decision makers. We're trying to get the CHRO in the room to provide an insight briefing, or we're trying to invite them to events. We're trying to nurture that relationship in that account so that they will renew, and that we can, showcase the impact that we've made in their organization really clearly and cleanly, and also offer us as high value of an experience partnering with us as we can. So yeah. And then from the member's perspective, the member will also know. So like if you were a member, say, and BetterUp was part of your organization, you might get an email that's like, hey, guess what? Good news, congratulations. You've been gifted BetterUp from your employer. Click here to get started. You've got access to X, Y, and Z, a one-to-one coach, a group coaching, blah, 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 for 6 months. The first step is take this assessment, blah, 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 blah. And then we, guide you on your journey.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great
Chelsea?
questions.
Okay, I have two that are kind of like not connected. First of all, if you guys are getting data from a company that has come and contracted you to do some type of program or research from them, who owns the data after it's all said and done?
Yeah. The data that we collect, I mean, we definitely own it. I think the partner also owns it. I think we co-own that data. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the case, but we for sure own it because we use it 10 million ways.
Okay, that's what I was wondering too, because you're talking about labs in this, brain lab development section, and you're getting
Yeah.
all this data from all these different sources.
Yeah,
It would be very frustrating if you had this data and you weren't able to use it for others.
right.
So I was curious about that. And secondly, in terms of, and Carl, you basically asked a main big part of this question. And so thank you for that explanation as well. When you get a client who comes to you with a very specific idea of what they need, and maybe they're very tunnel vision focused, this is what I want. But as the accounts team goes through it and they really think they need to like go to a different section and redirect that, how often does that happen, and how difficult is it for clients who are coming to a company or an organization like yours to kind of get that buy-in and that change in viewpoint?
Yeah, so you're saying like if they started.
Like if I come to you and I
Mhm.
think I've got just a big stress problem,
Yeah,
but as we're talking and we're thinking,
Yeah.
you guys are getting more involved and more information, you
Yeah.
really think it's a diversity and
Yeah.
inclusion issue,
oh yeah,
but maybe I don't want to hear that,
yeah,
or, how
Yeah.
often does that kind of play into this? Or just
Yeah.
because your company is so people motivated to begin with and centered on that exceptional well-being track,
Yeah.
are the companies that are coming to you already kind of like 2 steps ahead of that game?
yeah. No, they're not. Oftentimes there's people in those companies who are, but definitely there's so many interesting, broader dynamics where, certain executives or decision makers or people that hold authority or hold the purse strings, like, are not bought in. And like one individual maybe, or a program manager who's like responsible for, a specific learning and development objective or agenda or initiative, they're fully bought in, but they've got to convince all these other people in their organization to also be bought in. So that's also account management. So the account management teams also get really, really good at knowing, okay, this person is this, has this authority, this is their agenda, this is who they report to, and they're going to need to drive, X thing that person cares about. And they're putting all of these clues together. It's like detective work to figure out how we can best support our champion in championing these ideas. And that may include putting together decks for them. That may include inviting people strategically to different kinds of events we're putting on. It may, there's a lot of different strategies that the account management team takes. But that's why it's I think probably so attractive and fascinating for Levi, who sits on that team as a psychologist, because there's so much sort of people reading and dynamics and strategy and really knowing people and understanding their needs, and then being able to deliver on them in order to help get alignment and buy-in and, cohesive movement toward one goal. But then also, as you said, like there may be that we come back with data that's like different from what even, our champion maybe wanted to hear, or, the story that they were hoping to tell. We try to be really sensitive to that, but I have found when I was in sort of the client facing work and doing that, post-sales consulting work, I found that those scenarios were actually by and large really welcomed. Like people really got into it in a way, like when you're like, okay, so you wanted to increase productivity, and we did see a slight increase in productivity, but here's why productivity is struggling. Like, look at how low your rest is. Like your people are not resting. What's going on with your like time off policies and like, you know, do your people disconnect? How are you helping them detach? Because there's no way that we're going to be able to move this when your rest level is, you know, 30% below your industry benchmark. Like that is like a, you know, direct connection. So, you know, or connecting it through cognitive agility or being able to focus, you know, focus is such a huge, this is a little bit of a side tangent, but really interesting. Focus is like the worst of all of our whole person model scores. It's just consistently rock bottom. It's just so low for everybody. Like our distraction levels in the world are so high. People just struggle so much with just focus. So really fascinating at a macro level. But anyway, I've found that clients really enjoy, like, they kind of nerd out on it, you know, like it's fun to kind of be like, you thought this, but actually here's what we're seeing and here's what we think is why. And so that means like, this is where you can really, you know, make hay or like really move the meter is by, you know, let's actually readjust and kind of run a mini campaign where we really reinforce the ideas of rest and recovery and taking time for yourself and being able to detach. And let's do that for 3 months or whatever it is, you know, and see how it goes. So yeah, but I think to your point, like there may be times where those aren't welcome messages. And, you know, that's where the skill of like a really good consultant comes in to help navigate, you know, how it's positioned, how it's shared, how it's framed, and, you know, help make it not feel threatening to whomever it is the audience is.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so this is really kind of a similar concept to some of the things I said, but it's just sort of showing that we look at organizational priorities, we look at individuals' assessments, we look at their development goals, we run them through you know, artificial intelligence engine, and then kind of suggest the different support levels they need. And then we also provide, like, this is sort of an example of what a client might see at the very beginning of an engagement with us, where we might run like a big heat map across, you know, their different their subgroups or functions. So let's say they're interested in technology and human resources orgs and finance and their high potentials and their sales organization. And then we look across all of our whole person model dimensions, and then we can sort of highlight like, okay, here's the hot spots, or here's where you really want to, you know, maybe spend some money, pay some attention, you could give some extra support. And here are kind of the areas where you might think about doing that. I think this actually may be anonymized real data from someone, but you can see focus, like it's just low. It's always low. So, and then this is kind of what it looks like to see if you were in the seat of the HR talent leader, leadership development buyer. You would be able to see sort of these dashboards of data where it shows you like what the topic trends are. So like, you know, leading others, you know, was the top topic in August and it was up 18% from, you know, July. Or you can see where, you know, on aggregate behavior shifts are happening. You can learn more about what those behavior shifts mean. So some of the work that we're doing now as a business is starting to kind of, how can we scale all of the consulting that we've been doing very manually for a very long time? How can we help bring some of that into more autonomous self-serve platforms, you know, create opportunities where it still feels high value. You can learn things, you can dive deeper, double click, you know, expand into resources or whatever, so that partners have more at their fingertips insights versus having to wait for, you know, one of us consultants to be able to, you know, contextualize it for them. So yeah, this is just a couple of screen views of like what it looks like for a member, like the employees, to see like, okay, you scored, you know, your strengths are here, focus, energy, communication, mindfulness, and you can kind of learn about that, learn what it means. We recommend resources. We also have these sort of profiles or names, sort of like if you were to take like a, this part actually wasn't done by the science team. I think this was developed inside the product team. But they named like different almost like a latent profile analysis, like you're a dreamer, or like you're a, I don't even remember all the names, but, based on your kind of collection of scores. And then in the analytics dashboard for partners, this is a similar view of what I was showing you before. And yeah, partners are only viewing the data in aggregate, never at an individual level. So we're always kind of protecting privacy there. So in the member journey would start with like an initial assessment. Then they meet with their coach, they do some 360, they see the partner is able to see kind of topics and usage and satisfaction and monitor how their program is going. We do reflection points every 4 months approximately. So we get longitudinal data over time. We also, as a side note, we also do post-session data, which gives us a lot of within-person data. So we get to kind of get a pulse on people even within their coaching journey after every single session, which is really fascinating because not only does it give us like a really quick daily, like thousands of people are providing data to us every day about how they're feeling and their productivity levels, but also within people, we can also use that data for really interesting within-person data, within-person views. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about the research that you guys conduct, because it sounds like a lot of times you are able to use data that you're collecting with the partners that you're working with, like Chelsea was talking about. But I'm very curious about more of like the basic research that you talked about that you guys do, like science for the sake of science.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are a lot of PhDs within your company, so I'm sure, this is maybe the norm, but do you guys have a lot of like grants that you bring in to conduct that research? Or how do you conduct all the research that you need to do in order to be on the cutting edge, like what you said, for understanding the complex issues that you're trying to solve?
Yeah. Yes. So there are I would say there's sort of two teams that are focused on science for the sake of science. One of them is the one that I described, labs. And actually, I'll come back to this, but so science just for discovery. So Better Up Labs, this is a team that sits inside of our product organization. So they're actually in service of product and operate collectively as research and development, but there's a sub team that's focused on sort of the groundbreaking blue sky, disruptive science that's going to change how we think about these topics. There's another team that's focused on assessment and impact and effectiveness. So really trying to understand like, okay, what's the exact most effective cadence to meet with a coach? Or, how long does it take for an individual to make change in focus? And then if we see a change in focus of some magnitude, what's the distal kind of impact that we see 3 months later? So really trying to understand how behavior change happens and how those, how the experiences can be combined to create really impactful development paths. And then there's a third team that's focused on user experience. So it's people science, we call it people science, but really it's about the user experience and how we design for a really powerful member or user experience in the product and what that product design should look like. So those are the 3 teams in labs. These are kind of the sort of like an overview. It's like, we want to be on the cutting edge of research on human flourishing, well-being, even transcendence, the scientific heart of Better Up, research at the forefront of technology to create tools that really empower people, have an energizing relationship with all of R&D where science is really infused into the product, and to be a really key differentiator for both our product, but the experience, the impact, and our brand overall. Yeah, the work here can often be expensive. It can be very long time horizons. Sometimes it's pretty secretive because sometimes we're working on things in that team that it's a competitive differentiator that we wouldn't, even want to talk about too broadly. So
what's the most secretive thing you're working on right now? You can tell it just amongst us. We won't share.
Yeah, I mean, there's some cool I mean, they do some cool stuff. Like, when I applied, I think I can tell you this, when I applied to BetterUp, one of the things that we were asked to do, or I was asked to do when I was in the application process, was come up with the most out of the box idea that you could think of. Imagine budget was no limit, like products, could do whatever you wanted. Like, how would you design an experience based in science for, behavior change in a member? And this is what I presented. And it was like, no one even batted an eye at it. And it was like, what if in the BetterUp app, you pull it up, and then as you look around your workspace, it's an augmented reality view. And as you work with your coach can put a flag over here that says hey, that, open your window and get fresh air, one time a day, or hey, remember, when you send that email to, check for understanding and make sure that, you're, whatever it is, so it'd be as you navigate your world, we could use, science-based behavior nudges and reminders that coaches could, influence, and you could influence collectively. So that's an idea. We're not doing that, so I feel like it's okay to share, but that's the kind of thing that we are trying to work on. And the way it gets funded is really just, I mean, how any of our functions get funded. It's not oh, you have to go out and get these grants in order to do this research if you want to do it. It's no, this is a core part of our business, and millions of dollars are devoted to it as a core part of our business, central part of our business. So it's a very different environment, I think, than, for example, in academia, where, even as a professor, you're sometimes in positions where you have to figure out your own funding, but that's definitely not the case for BetterUp Labs.
That is so interesting to me, but thank you for that.
I know, it is interesting. It's interesting to me too. And then the other team is, I would say, is my team, actually. So sitting in marketing, and really, I guess this is not really a great example, but maybe this one. So, it is thinking about, how do we do research using our member data set for good? We're collecting so much data all the time. And so how do we become a force for good in helping use that data to extract understanding and discovery and insights that can help people, that can help our partners, that can help individual people, not thinking about what's the craziest big idea that we're going to work on for 2 years in, in secrecy, but how do we stay on top of the trends? And so this is where my team comes into play. We know we're going through, the great resignation, or we know, working parents are really struggling, or we know mental health is becoming an issue. We know people are feeling super disconnected and, are struggling with belonging. How do we address those problems now? Because those are the national conversations, or those are the macro environmental challenges that organizations are facing this quarter, this year, and it may not be this summer, it's now. So how do we be on top of that and be able to insert ourselves into those conversations and help and provide a very evidence-based, set of insights based on the data we're collecting? Because really our CEO and COO, they are very much behind the idea. They built this company with the vision of we're not just collecting data to hoard it and keep it private. We're collecting data to be able to create knowledge that advances science, helps the broader community and the world. And it's not something that we want to keep under lock and key. It's something that we want to use for scientific discovery to help and, broadcast and share, which I really, respect and appreciate. So this is an example of we are looking at our data and, putting together insights around loneliness or belonging, and then trying to, pitch it into places where we know that leaders are going to read, like Harvard Business Review. And this is some of the other research we recently did on my team. So we knew we ran a survey externally, and this is where it like looks very much like academia, or it's like, okay, we're gonna like, collect some participants on Prolific, and we're gonna do, get out R and do our analyses and create, our insights from there. This is very, very similar to the process that you would go through just doing research in academia. But so here we were collecting data in the UK and in Germany. We were looking at mental health and the Great Resignation, and also feelings about childcare and sort of the struggle of guilt with childcare, and how much guilt was playing a role, especially in particular, childcare guilt playing a role in turnover intentions and intentions to leave. But some of the interesting—
I love the disparity there.
Yeah. Oh, are you looking at Germany? Yeah. I mean, this is fascinating. So we found that men report that their partner spends, they agree. The women are spending more time on childcare than they are, like by 40%, but women are reporting that they spend 189% more time than their partner on childcare. So we agree, kind of, but not to the sort of scope and magnitude of what women really are feeling, at least in Germany. Yeah. But then we turn this stuff into like, we do these, we do these research studies, we see these findings, then we turn these into like the most like pithy, eye-catching kind of statistics that we can. We deliver these over to our PR agency, and then our PR agency tries to, and our PR team, we have an internal PR team too, but we also rely on an agency a lot. We'll try to get it landed, in different outlets. So I think, like this was, one of the last reports that we did was on what we call the future-minded leader, which really is about the idea of prospection, which is a concept that Roy Baumeister and Marty Seligman, others from Penn have written about and, done academic research on. And we did a whole body of research on this. We used our member data. We did some experimental data, experimental studies. And then we put together this report. And then what we try to do is like run a whole campaign around some of these research projects where we put out the report, and then we try to do, LinkedIn lives and get it, picked up in the press and do interviews and feature it in different places and try to really get it out into the world. And that's like a part of the work that I do, at least, that I find really fulfilling, because it just feels good to know that work that I think is really important when you're in a company like BetterUp that has a whole marketing engine behind it, that has, a PR and content team and writers. We have a whole staff that's like, yes, let's get this out there. And it feels so good to see it be accessible for people. So that's what gets me jazzed up.
Andressa has a question for you.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, hi, can you hear me?
I can. I thought you were on mute for a second, but you're not.
Sorry. Sometimes this doesn't work, so just making sure. Based on what you were saying before, with the graphs about the parent leave and that kind of stuff, I was just wondering if sometimes IOPs and OHPs, can they work in a more like systemic level with proposing or doing some kind of something that impacts on policies and some, kind of like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Do you mean like at the government level?
Right.
Yeah.
The research, but also trying to like make a change that's more broad than just in one organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are definitely, especially in OHP. I mean, there's work that's tied into government and sort of total worker health movement, and trying to create policy change at really, country levels and policy levels and legal levels. And one thing that's kind of interesting that BetterUp is trying to do, I don't know how successful this is going to be, but one of the things that we believe in at Better Up is called Inner Work, which is really about the work that we all can do to take care of ourselves, to find centeredness, to reconnect with our inner beings, our inner lives, our inner worlds, and the importance of doing that as a preventative measure to combat, languishing and mental health issues and burnout and stress, and remaining connected to our purpose and our mission, and feeling aligned to our values. And anyway, it's a kind of a broad concept, but it's basically the notion that in every organization, we shouldn't just be asking people to do outer work, just, producing for the company, but we should also be supporting individuals to do the work that helps them to do that outer work better. And, that means like providing them time sometimes to journal, to reflect, to work on a relationship that needs mending or repair, to, reconnect with nature, to play. So one of the things Better Up does is we have 5 inner work days a year. So every year the whole company is working. We're all working. It's not a day off, but we're doing inner work that day. And so we do that 5 times a year. And right now we're kind of on a mission to try to bring inner work to more organizations as just a concept. And one of the things, so I'm tying this back to your question, because one of the things that Better Up is trying to do is actually influence, like, I don't know who the powers, I guess it's the United Nations, to make like an inner work day internationally, like a day that would be recognized like a holiday of like, this is inner work day. And we, take today to recognize and acknowledge and act on our needs for inner work, sort of like how we have like Small Business Friday, or no, Small Business Friday. There's, like REI did Opt Outside, and then I think it was American Express that championed Small Business Saturday. I think it is Small Business Saturday. So something like that. So that's like, I guess, a small example of that. And I don't think is really addressing your question, but an example of something that Better Up's trying to do at like a bigger level of like, not just the companies we serve, but how do we really like make broader change?
And I think that a lot of the findings that Better Up comes up with, because of the large number of IO psychology professionals who are also heavily involved in PSYOP, I've seen folks from Better Up working with our PSYOP, Society for IO Psychology, UN delegation and group that informs the UN as well. I was sitting on as a consultant for one of those activities, and it's fascinating the way the information flows and starts to get into some policy. So
yeah.
I was wondering, does Better Up engage in any what do you call it, lobbying?
Not yet, not that I know of, but we did hire Prince Harry.
Okay, guess he needed a job.
Yeah, so Prince Harry is legitimately our Chief Impact Officer. I was in a meeting with him last week. He works with us, and really his role is to figure out the biggest impact ways for us to shift the narrative, to make mental health issues on the forefront of policy, on the forefront of people's minds, of organizations' minds, to evangelize these ideas, and also to do philanthropy in partnership with Better Up. So that's,
Very
that's
cool.
a step, but I don't know that it's exactly lobbying yet.
Not in terms of lobbying, but what about volunteer time? Like, what do you guys do, if anything, to like really focus on your presence in the community and a positive impact?
Yeah. So I've been really impressed. Better Up actually does a lot of sort of both as a brand or like as a business, but then also like as an employer, we do a lot. So I can address both of those. But as a business, we've done a lot of sort of free pro bono open coaching for months at a time, like 4 months at a time or 6 months at a time. We've had a ton of different relationships with nonprofit organizations where we've offered free coaching through the nonprofit to the communities they serve or to them directly. We did a whole sort of special project when COVID started where we were offering free coaching for, I think it was 4 months to anyone who wanted it, who was a frontline worker. And that included teachers, it included, caregivers in various situations who had to go to work, and any frontline worker and healthcare workers. So that was, I was really impressed with that generosity. And then we also, we did a similar thing when Simone Biles was in the Olympics. And had to take that step back due to her, mental health state. And so we made a similar offer, just like general public, like it's not like that's not just like athletes, like we all, struggle. And it can get in the way of our ability to show up at our best and to meet our goals and to pursue our dreams. So we did that. And then we've also joined, it's called the 1% pledge. So 1% of all of our proceeds as a business they go back into a gigantic pool that goes into philanthropy and charity. And there's like, I don't know how many organizations across the world are a part of the 1% pledge, but we just announced that actually a few weeks ago and had a big ad in Times Square about it, which was cool. So those are some of the ways the business seeks to give back. And then as an employer, like we also have a bunch of relationships with charities and nonprofits that like it's facilitated through BetterUp for us to do volunteering ourselves. And we get 5 volunteer days every year as well. So it's not time off or anything. It's just, we can volunteer for 5 days a year. We track it as like a company metric, keeping track of our percentage that we're giving back to the community. They also do like donation matching and stuff like that. When we've had these like big crises like Ukraine, some of the like shootings and just so many like horrible events in the world that have happened, it seems, in the last few years, but they've done gigantic donations and, let all of us know that we're as a business kind of doing that stuff. So I don't know if that fully answers. I think so, but
yeah, I think that's really fascinating. So many different areas and levels that you guys are doing it on. That's really amazing, actually. And it triggered another question, because that's all I do is talk. But I think on one of the slides, maybe like right at the beginning, you said something about, having, you guys are global. Mm-hmm. So how do the different, cultural contexts come into play as you guys are, meeting the needs of these different organizations and people?
Oh my gosh, that's the question of the day for me, because we are global, but we are relatively newly global, sort of formally. We just actually opened an office, the physical space in London this week. So that was an exciting kind of moment for the business. But yeah, it's a really important question. And it's one that I don't think we have fully addressed to the extent that we will. Of course, that makes sense because we're new to these markets, but we're hiring a bunch. We're hiring a bunch in Europe. We're hiring a bunch sort of physically there. And then we're also hiring specialists that will support those markets, because they are very different contexts. They are very different places. For example, we had one of the pieces of insight or stats that's on our website is about how, when you reduce stress, you can reduce healthcare spend. And that's part of sort of the positioning that we have right now on our primary website. And we talk about that and some insights there. one of our brand new European marketing managers, who's now on the marketing team that I'm on. She and I were having a conversation this week because she was like, this doesn't make any, like, nobody cares in Europe. They don't have, there is no healthcare spend. Like, that is not compelling. It's like, oh yeah, good point. Yeah. Okay. So what do we do? And so we're like working together to figure it out. Like, what's the alternative, or like how, okay, what should we say? And, can we work, now we got to work to figure out what that figure is going to look like and what that message is going to be, because it isn't the same. So yeah, I think, I think we're doing all the right things. We're just still learning as we go.
That's really exciting. But I mean, given, so you got Europe that you're talking about, eventually, if you went into Asia or, the Middle East or different areas like that, all of them with different contextual, situations.
Totally.
So like, are you hiring to meet those from within the local communities to kind of like come back and like teach you guys too what's needed in those situations?
Yeah, I think that's the ideal. Like we definitely are trying to hire locally. But as I said, also we are also hiring specialists who may or may not be local. Actually, I'm trying to think of like, I think almost all of the new hires are local, but then we did have like a program for people who were stateside that wanted to become expatriates and like kind of help establish like the cultural, like better up cultural office, and like kind of be cultural co-founders in these new locations to kind of bring us and our,
Bridge the two ideas.
Yeah. So we do have a lot of people who moved overseas in the last few months. And I think those are like a 1 year or 2 year program. So I guess the idea is that they will come back at some point.
So Erin, thank you so much for starting us off with an amazing trailer tease on what Better Up is doing and where you're headed. I look forward to continuing our conversation at some point because there's, like I said earlier, everything you're going to talk about is interesting and everything is interesting. And I appreciate very much on all our behalves that you spent the evening with us.
Yeah. Oh, it was really, truly my pleasure. I'm so happy to be able to share all this with you. And for anyone, who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, or if you have other questions, I really am open to answer. And I think I owe you, I'll have to look into, I think it was the question about ethics, which is a great question, and like what the dividing line is and how we kind of handle that. So I'll circle back and then, share that answer out so you can share it with the class. But yeah, I'm so glad to meet everyone and be able to be a part of your night and be a part of your course.
Well, thank you very much. This is a course in occupational stress and health psychology. So everything is right up there. And for those who are in the course, hopefully it gave you a little bit of perspective of how we take all that literature that you're reading, and that literature that you're reading, and those articles are just a tiny smidgen of what's actually coming out and how it's guiding the practice. So hopefully you're all seeing that connection and appreciating all the more so this course that you're taking and what an impact we can all make in the world of health for workers. So thank you.